I made a video yesterday about Justin Roiland getting arrested and ending his career possibly, and ending the careers of a lot of other people that worked with him and worked for him. And that really got me to thinking about something. So today, I'd like, if you would bear with me, I'm going to tell you a story time about why I've changed the way I live my life. I was born in 1974, almost 50 years ago, and that was right after the civil rights movement and the women's rights movements and Vietnam and all of this other horrible stuff. And the world that I was born into was kind of a gray area. It was much more gray than it is today, where everything seems to be constantly black and white. Back then, you had comedians like George Carlin and Lenny Bruce that were really pushing the edge of good taste when it came to comedy, and their version of edgy was mostly just swear words, saying things that people would not necessarily agree with, that kind of thing. And sure, there was plenty of people that complained, but your average person just chose not to listen to it and chose not to care. And what I always found so interesting is that whether it was Sam Kinison or George Carlin or Lenny Bruce, most of these comedians tended to be pretty good people. I mean, they struggled with their drugs, they struggled with their depression and their mental health, but for the most part, they turned out to be very good human beings. On the other side of the coin back then, we had paragons of just normal decency like Michael Jackson and Bill Cosby, and we all know how those stories turned out. It seemed like to me when I was growing up, the people that tried to be the kindest were generally the worst, and the people that tried to push the envelope tended to be the best kind of people. And the people that were pushing the envelope during the 80s and 90s, I mean, they got invited everywhere. They were on MTV. They got comedy specials on HBO. They were paid millions of dollars for being offensive, and people loved it. They ate it up. It didn't matter whether it was books or music or movies, but especially stand-up comedy. People liked it when you would say unpopular things that were offensive for the sake of shocking them to make them laugh. And just like today, back then, we still had your Tipper Gores and your Hillary Clintons trying to fight this stuff and censor it and shut it down. But the more they did that, the more popular it became. Just like today, as people move further and further right, as people try to push the world further and further left. The funny thing is, though, back then, when somebody told offensive jokes about sexism or racism or things along that lines, you always knew they didn't mean it. You always trusted that they were probably a good person. If they were getting a comedy special, if they were on HBO, then chances are they probably weren't doing anything horrible behind the scenes. And there was only a handful of rare cases like that. But something really changed along the lines over the last few years. It's gotten now to where a comedian like Justin Roiland, who is making these types of jokes on stage or in their games or in their shows, might actually be doing that stuff behind the scenes as well. And it's actually gotten to the point where I hear certain types of jokes mentioning certain types of things from comedians or people on social media, and I just genuinely presume that they are probably actually into it and they're using their comedy to justify it. There's a wonderful episode of a podcast by Bob Saget, starring BJ Novak as his guest, and they discuss this stuff at length. And I'm going to show you some clips from it, but I'm also going to link to it down below. I think you should listen to this entire podcast because it's really interesting, but I really think some of this stuff drives the points I'm trying to make here today home.
Well, my whole act was taboo. This sort of, as was yours, in a previous phase, which it was sort of, at least for me, and I think for you too, in a way, the understood premise was, what if I got on stage and said this? Like, obviously, this is not the right thing to say.
Right.
And I think people got it then. I think the times are different now, so you do different things now. But in context then, that was an understood backdrop. Felt safe making jokes like that then because it felt so obvious that anyone in their right mind would have certain points of view. And now it feels like everything is chaotic.
Back in the day, I used to post on 4chan every day and often participated in very offensive humor because I knew I didn't mean these things, so I can only presume the people who are also making these jokes didn't mean those things as well. But these days, it seems like a lot of comedians, when they say something, they mean it. And even if they don't, there's members of the audience who will take it as something that they truly, absolutely mean, and it validates some really negative beliefs. There certainly was a period of time in my life where you could trust that a comedian or a friend who was making an offensive joke did not mean the thing that they were saying. And I feel like now, here in 2023, when somebody makes an offensive joke, they are just using that humor as a way to mask their real feelings. And like I said, even if they're not, there's people out there who will believe them and act on it. I still believe that stand-up comedy is a great place to discuss and challenge moral ideas and concepts, and I think it's a great way to do it, to get people thinking and talking and feeling, and I really hope we can continue to do that. But in the modern world, I feel like I am choosing not to consume this type of comedy as often, and I am absolutely choosing not to make those jokes myself, just because I don't want anybody taking me the wrong way. Certainly, the people out there who think I might actually mean the offensive thing I was choosing to say because they want to cancel me, but more importantly, for the ones who choose to believe it to reinforce their own hateful ideas. But as usual, this is just one sit-down comedian's ideas. I could be wrong, and I know you're going to let me know in the comments section down below. This is very different from the type of content I normally make, so let me know what you think. And as always, thanks for watching. I love you very much, and I will speak with you again soon.